Okay, so thank you all. So the second panel is going to build on some of the challenges and issues we talked about in the first session. And we've boldly called this the University of the Future. And I want to just frame that for you because I think we this afternoon began talking about, and very appropriately, the role of undergraduate, graduate, and professional education. And, that makes great sense when we're talking about life journeys that go on for 20, 30 years of career performance. And as many of you know, it wasn't too long ago that in the 1930s, almost a century, that a new narrative was described which really generated around Social Security, which defined the time that people transition from career journeys. And I think what we've witnessed, over this almost same century is a dramatic increase in life expectancy. And that really asks the question of what do you do after you've had your first career? Now, I realize for many young people today that's measured in a year, but traditionally 20 to 30 years in sort of the same space is enough to think about what you're going to do next. And how do you go about thinking about how you'll do that? So we've watched over the centuries, evolution of universities in significant ways, remembering that the first universities go back to the 11th century, and they had very definite goals. It was mostly about religious training and classical training, and it was really only in the 19th century that professional schools and graduate schools began to be incorporated into university life. The very first school that focused on continuing education, an additional role for universities, was the University of Wisconsin, and that goes back to 1906. And universities began embracing the concept of adult education in addition to the role of undergraduate and graduate education. And of course, with the continued evolution of new programs, particularly online programs, new evolutions began to develop. And all of those make great sense, but I think that they beg some very important additional questions and challenges, which is, if we think about a university as a place where young people go, what would it look like if we had more intergenerational learning and teaching? What would it be like if we actually had people come back to universities in sort of mid-career and engage with those same undergraduate and graduate students? You'll remember not too long ago when he was here that President Obama said, college is wasted on the young. Now, I don't think that at all. I think it belongs to the young, but I also think it belongs to people in midlife. Now, there's a personal story that I'll just share with you very briefly. I had been thinking about this on a very deep personal level for a long time. I told you in the first session that I was a philosophy major in college, and then I went on to a career in science and medicine that lasted many decades. But I had planned way back at the beginning that there was going to come a point in time when I was going to transition out of my traditional comfort zone of medicine and science into a new area. So when I was being recruited here in 2000, I actually asked to meet with David Kennedy in the history department because I told him that I was going to be one of his PhD students at some point. Well, I didn't do that. Instead of that, I developed the concept for what we now call the Distinguished Careers Institute at Stanford, that is taking a small number of people in sort of their midlife who've had very accomplished careers who are spending a year here doing three things. One is thinking about how to repurpose themselves in new directions, how to build community, which is not something that you can do online. You need to be together to do that in some fashion, and how to recalibrate wellness from the perspective of physical, emotional, and spiritual health. And the basic thesis is that if you do that, this could potentially have a significant impact on the life journey in a positive way by potentially attenuating the onset of chronic decline, or on a macro scale, reducing the need for medical and social services. Now, Jim Plummer, in the earlier session, made a very important point, which is that the DCI program is very selective and only admits 25 fellows each year. The night program, which brings people back from careers in journalism, is also a relatively small program. So we're not going to solve the problem of the world here at Stanford by small programs, but I think we have an opportunity to scale in a different way, which is to collaborate and engage with other colleges across the country and then globally to catalyze their engagement in midlife education as well. And although the program that we've started here, DCI, is really just a little over a year old already, we have several other universities that are coming to us wanting to start similar but different programs, because this is a realm of a potential vast experimentation as we begin thinking about the future. So to me, the future of a university begins with really what is the starting point of undergraduate and graduate education. It might be, as the D School considered a couple of years ago, an open loop university where people can keep coming back over time to acquire new skills, either directly in short courses or using other online resource principles. It might be in certain professions, like in journalism, coming back and being a Knight Fellow and learning new skills, or coming back and becoming a DCI Fellow. So that is phase one. The second phase is what happens to the learning environment when the experienced folks who've had a life journey begin interacting with undergraduate and graduate students. So that's the theme of our session today. I've asked each of our panelists to share with you a little bit about their experience individually and collectively, because they've all had some of that experience with you. So we have two DCI fellows, Joan Solwin, who will speak first in just a moment. She'll tell you a little bit about who she is and how she got here. And then we have almost a twofer, because Steve Levine did join DCI. Maybe it was for remedial education, or because he didn't get enough last year when he was at Harvard in the Advanced Leadership Initiative. But we're pleased to have Steve here as well.
Yeah.
And then we have Umbreen Bhatia, who's been a Knight Fellow, and she'll speak about her journey. And then two undergraduate students, Sandy Lee, who's a sophomore in psychology, and Madeline Antaversen, who's a sophomore in computer science. And then we have two graduate students, Allison Stanton at the end, who's a candidate in bioengineering, PhD candidate, and Neve Gavin, who is an MBA student. And they've all had interactions with some of our DCI fellows, not necessarily those who are here, and Knight Fellows. And so we're going to ask you each to talk about what that means in terms of your education by engaging in intergenerational learning and teaching, and how that potentially has a transformative impact on universities as we know it today and think about them for the future. So we'll start with you, Joan.
Thank you, Phil. And I'm very pleased to be here today. Thank you for inviting me. So I'll just start nearly 35 years ago when I jumped out of the undergraduate nest at Northwestern University, and I began my STEM career. So I was a computer programmer, designer, tester, data conversion, all that. And I had the good fortune to work for a company that invested bazillions of dollars in professional development. So when I started at Anderson Consulting, now Accenture, I didn't know how to program, design code, test, and neither did any of the other people who were hired with me. But of course, technology changed at a much slower rate then than it does now. But as technology changed, the firm continued to invest in our development and growth, which provided for me a spectacular 20-year career, and I love that. And immediately after that, I began a second career in K-12 independent education, which I just put a bow on with my retirement as a headmaster last July. So that's when I really started thinking about my third act and how I wanted to continue to contribute, to grow, to learn. And a colleague of mine was familiar with both the ALI program at Harvard and DCI here at Stanford. And I was really looking for a way to immerse myself in a very vibrant learning environment. I knew that for what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go, kind of a self-guided, what color is my parachute kind of thing probably wasn't going to meet my needs. But being able to be with fabulous graduates and graduate students and undergraduate students, which I've already had the pleasure to do extensively in 2 courses that I have this quarter, to interact with outstanding faculty, to make use of great resources at libraries and centers on campus, to be part of a cohort where there were others who had very diverse professional experiences, but in many ways were like-minded in terms of what kind of potential each of us had to offer. You know, that was really something that I wanted to grab hold of. And I have been very grateful so far with all of that dream coming true and being able to kind of explore. I really do believe that my career trajectory is in the direction of the intersection of jobs, the environment, and food security. And I'm finding, you know, students, faculty, the staff of DCI, everyone, to be exceedingly supportive of that exploration and in a way, a kind of accountability for me. So while this is a gap year that is very expansive and wonderful and pushing me to the limits, I also know that I only have 10 more months. So that creates a certain sense of urgency in terms of mining from the program and from my own involvement in the university as much as I possibly can. So that's how I got here.
Very good. I grew up in San Diego, and I applied to only one college, which they told me was the best one in San Diego, which was University of California at San Diego. And I was afraid that I wouldn't get my choice. I might get sent someplace like Berkeley. But fortunately, and I was in the San Diego Youth Symphony, and my friend, I was very limited horizons, I would say. But I had a wonderful time majoring in biology at UCSD. Minored in sociology and found I liked that a lot. So I ended up going to graduate school at Cornell and a PhD in sociology. I thought I was only leaving California temporarily. But then I moved to New York City and met my wife, my future wife in New York, who was an Eastern girl. And I worked first as a journalist. And then we moved to Washington, D.C. I worked as a defense analyst, and then we moved to Boston. I worked as a manager of a software company in new business development. And then my wife and I started a business. And by the way, I had absolutely no business education. I wish I had had at least accounting class or something, but I didn't. But we started this business anyway, and we became entrepreneurs. Business called Levenger, which sells products to tools for serious readers, right? And as far as I know, we were the first company to sell products to readers other than publishers. So we weren't selling books and magazines, but selling stuff, leather products, notebooks, pens, furniture, et cetera. And we had a good amount of success with that. Did that for 25 years. And now I'm happy to say we have a much more competent CEO than myself running the place. And I am free to, in a way, get back to my earlier interests in life. And I never would have guessed in a million years, but I'm now passionately interested about bilingualism. It started when I was disgusted with myself for being a monolingual and started learning Spanish about 6 years ago. And people said the oddest things to me, which got me to do some research. And now I'm writing a book on designing our multilingual future in the United States. And so I am absolutely delighted to come back. I should say that when I was at Cornell as a grad student, my fondest memories were working with undergrads as a teaching assistant. And now the chance to do that again is wonderful. I'm looking for a research assistant, an undergraduate, to help me with my research now. And I feel like a kid in a candy store here. You know, there are just so many opportunities, and I know how fast it will go. So I'm relishing every day of it.
Thank you, Sam.
Hi, everyone. My name's Umbreen, and I knew I was going to go after two people with remarkable careers, so I am not going to talk about mine. Instead, I'm going to tell you three things that you learn when you go back to school at exactly twice the age you were the first time you went. The first is that you will not stop thinking about your age. Really. You're like, well, were they born before or after 9/11? Were they born in the 80s? Like what? It was so confusing to me for a while, until you find the experiences that don't make you think about that. In one of my D-School classes at the end, we all went around and talked about things that we were thinking about. It was a really touchy-feely moment about what people were gonna work on in the future. And one student said, "I just want my senior year to be the best ever." And I was like, what? Like, I thought she was 29. So yes, at some point you do stop thinking about it. The second thing is that you should have as many lunches and coffees and those sorts of things as you can while you're here. You should probably skip some of the pastries. I have some regrettable weight gain from this year. I mean, what is with Stanford and the pastries? Especially the night fellowship. I think it's like a big, well-kept secret, but that is your work when you come back at this age. And I really loved that. I really loved that I spent so much time like just meeting and talking to so many people. And it took me a little bit of time. I would say it wasn't till like November that I didn't feel guilty for doing that and not like doing my reading for class. But as nights we don't get graded, it doesn't matter. And so that was really a really huge reward of being here. And the third is that if reading the book will get you most of the way there, or even a good chunk of the way there, then you should skip it. And that is probably the most important lesson for me because it took me straight to the D-School. So I had been looking for things at Stanford that were like super Stanford. Like, what can I do here that I will not get anyplace else? And I ended up at the D-School really out of, actually as part of my orientation. And so to go back a little bit, before I came to Stanford, I'm one of the rare night fellows, hardly any. I wonder if they'll continue to take chances on people like me in future years, but I'm not a journalist. I came because I had this sort of thing about journalism that was keeping me up at night. And I was editing a website that was looking at news coverage of Islam and Muslims, and specifically Islamic law. And we were sort of caught with this problem of, it's in the news literally every single day, and nobody is any more educated for it, despite the sort of thousands of words that have been written about it. So how do we better connect and unlock all of the academic expertise that exists on it and connect those people to lay people? And in that first workshop that I did, it was like a total eureka moment. I sat there and I realized like, oh, now I have the language to explain what it was that wasn't working. And what wasn't working was that we had like 7 users. So we were serving lay people, academics, legal academics, editors, journalists, publishers, like everybody, which meant we were kind of not really serving anybody. And it just gave me the language to think about that. And so now I actually do that in my work all day long. I now, after leaving Stanford, essentially help people apply design thinking to their own work in media projects and law projects. But more important than that, I've really tried to take the mindsets with me, and 2 that I really that's really stick with me are 1, which is creative confidence, which was mentioned on the last panel. And that one's not so hard actually, because once it kind of clicks for you, it's a muscle. You just keep doing it, and it's, once you realize you can have it, then you just have to practice it. The second, which has been a bit harder since I left, is this idea of radical collaboration, which is what the D-School calls it. It's really just this idea of getting people at the table who aren't typically at the table to talk about something. And so because my background is in both media and law, I look for ways to do that all the time. It's really, really, really hard in the real world. And so just to give you a sort of sense of where I am now, the project that I'm working on now is to build a design lab that will tackle criminal justice issues by bringing non-criminal justice experts to the table, because I think it's a very closed space and we don't really talk to people outside of it. So that's where I'm headed now, and if anybody wants to talk about it and you're not a lawyer or a journalist, please come find me.
I'm interested. I just want to let you guys know that you don't have to worry about your age, because in our class, I'm also in a class of DCI fellows. You guys are kind of like the cool kids who, know everything. I mean, you're really friendly, and you're, this group of awesome people. So yeah, you're like the academic jocks. Just so you guys know, you're superstars. But I'm afraid my portion is going to be academic jocks. But I'm afraid my portion is a little shorter, because I'm pretty much just talking about this one DCI fellow that I knew. So my most significant interaction with a DCI fellow happened last winter quarter, so the winter quarter of my freshman year. And her name was Reshmi, and she was actually a DCI partner. So she was a spouse of a DCI fellow. And she owned a cooking company, so she catered Indian food. And she integrated so well with our class. We all loved her because she was kind of like our mother in the class, and we needed that because we were freshmen who didn't know what we're doing. And she participated just as much as we did. She was perfect. And one discussion that actually stood out to me the most about that class was actually when we got to a topic about dementia. And it's a pretty serious topic. It was a longevity class, so it was relevant to our curriculum. We're talking about, what is it like to live with someone who has dementia? And none of us knew what it's like to be with someone who has dementia, simply because we're only 18, 19 years old. And turns out Reshmi actually lived with her mother-in-law who had severe dementia. And she started talking about her experience caring for her mother-in-law. I think her mother-in-law actually couldn't perform basic daily activities such as walking or eating by herself. And on top of that, Reshmi was also balancing managing her cooking company. So she had more than enough reason to kind of be bitter about it, to be emotionally charged. But what I think touched a lot of us in the seminar was the fact that she just kind of talked about it really, really coolly. And she said, this is what I do in my day-to-day life. And something about just the way she said it so kind of plainly, without any charged emotions, was really inspiring to us. The fact that she was that strong enough to deal with that. I feel like the DCI is great because, first of all, we have people coming from all sorts of careers who are so distinguished. I mean, if you look at the page, most of them are like former presidents and lawyers and the impressive bios. But I think one thing that the DCI program in particular really manages to manifest is emotional relationships, because there's a certain limit of mentorship. But I feel like programs like the DCI help gap any kind of age segregation that we see in society today, because there is a big intergenerational gap. And I feel like programs like these, if implemented into other universities in the future, will help us bridge that gap. And I think that is something that is very valuable.
Thank you, Sandra. Great.
So I'm also a sophomore in the undergraduate community, and I was fortunate enough to meet a fellow in one of the classes that I took at the business school last spring. And we were placed, it was a project-based class, and we were placed in the same group. And not only were we able to work together on the project, but once the class ended, I reached out to this person, Rich Goldberg, and asked him for his advice moving forward with my career, because I felt that I was falling into the same trap as a lot of my other colleagues in the undergraduate community, being, okay, we got into Stanford, this is awesome, this has been our biggest goal so far, and now the opportunities are endless, which is a beautiful thing, but it's also a bit daunting, because what do I want to do with my life? How should I proceed, and how am I going to maximize and capitalize on the opportunities that I have here at Stanford? And I think that having these fellows integrated into classes, both at the graduate and undergraduate community, was something that I was very fortunate to be a part of, because it created this connection and this mentorship organically. I know that there are a lot of programs on campus where you can check boxes for your interests and say what you're interested in, and then they'll pair you with someone who you would probably be a good fit with. But what was really beautiful about this interaction that I had in class that kind of formed into a mentorship was that I kind of saw how this person, Rich, was interacting in class, and I was able to speak with him on a more real personal level, because I wasn't worried about impressing him or making myself sound, like a possible future person to be employed by him, but instead was able to reach out and connect to him on that level. So in that sense, I'm very grateful for the program. I didn't even know that it existed before I came across this person, but it's definitely helped me, and I think will continue to help me as I, like my colleagues, try to find our own special place. Stanford kind of cultivates this idea of don't become a clog in the system, make your own impact, make your own mark. But finding out a way to make your own impact and make your own mark is something that, you can't just read in a book, and that happens by talking to people who have been through it before, who can help you along the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Gosh, these are hard acts to follow. So I'm Neve Gavin, a second year currently attempting an MBA at the Stanford Business School. As you can tell from the accent, I grew up in the UK and did my undergrad at Oxford and my master's in genetics. Regarding the topic at hand, I think from a pure content perspective, it's rapidly changed. So with a touch of a button nowadays, you can get a one-on-one on any topic you can think of through the likes of Khan Academy. You can access many of the best faculty through the MOOCs, and even insights into the best VCs and entrepreneurs here are readily available on blogs and the likes of Medium. But for me, college is less about the academics per se, much more about the experience. So that ability to integrate into a community that's a cross-section of society that you may not have otherwise engaged with. And that ability to engage in a two-way dialogue as opposed to just passively absorbing information is critical. You get to see things from other perspectives. It's only by interacting one-on-one you understand those cultural nuances and gain insights to things that they'll only reveal kind of face-to-face versus write down publicly on paper. And likewise, I've also enjoyed and benefited immensely from intergenerational learning within classes, not just through the likes of the DCI and Knight Fellows, but also with faculty and the guest lecturers that they bring back to classes, many of whom are alumni, are able to pass on their pearls of wisdom as to what they learned or what they wish they had done when they were still at business school and so forth. And then regarding the prior panel, I too hope to be a lifelong learner. I think nowadays the world and the sectors are just evolving so rapidly that from a pure practical perspective, there is this continuous need to reskill and retool. But I also hope that as time passes and I have some more money and ways to indulge, I hope to kind of engage some personal indulgences too, be it re-engaging and learning the piano again or some languages and otherwise, but just some thoughts.
Thank you.
Great. Well, I think I'll continue this more philosophical thread here because I think it's really, really inspiring, the whole topic, and thank you, Dr. Piso, for organizing this. So my name's Alice Stanton, and I did my undergrad at Princeton. I'm an East Coaster myself, and I think this whole thing has made me really grateful for the experiences that I've had in the university environment. And when I think about what is a university, what are we here for? And I think about the word education, from the Latin educare or educere, to draw forth, right? That a university is really drawing forth from all of that potential that we have, actual capability. And this is something that we can be doing our entire lives. And I think it's inspiring, the DCI program, and having the fellows around who really illustrate that really put into effect this whole lifelong learning attitude. I think, what do we do in a university? Well, we study. I think having the breadth of disciplines available to us is really important, and whether that comes through classes or whether that comes through outside programs, that's extremely valuable. And then the other component is high ideals, really inspiring to really set high goals, and lifelong learning is definitely one of them, and it's something that keeps all of these other ideals being refreshed and a new chance to look at them. I think I had a very inspiring professor that I worked for just last year, who, in addition to being an incredible scientist, was also an incredible leader. And the respect that he had for everyone, the respect that everybody wanted to give him, I think really took that experience above and beyond. I mean, having access to mentors like that was really such a life-changing opportunity. And this man is soon to become the next university president, precisely because of those capabilities that were so evident. And being able to transmit those kind of ideals, those kind of interpersonal skills, beyond just content-based learning, is something that is extremely valuable, especially for students who are younger and don't have so much experience. So, yeah.
Well, thank you all very much. And I think the important point here is that we are in a learning environment which is really in many ways bidirectional. It means that we can learn from each other, teach each other, share life experiences with each other, and mentor and guide each other. And that's what I think about as a university of the future. A place that is an anchor that allows people to enter and exit at different points in their career, and establish new ones as a derivative of that along the way. So sounds like we're making a start. We're very early in this phase. The night program has been around for quite a number of years, and I think we learn from it and share the benefits. And I think the other last point I'll make is there's a fundamental difference in being with someone who's neither your parent or your professor. And as much as professors are very important, there is a sort of distance, that comes about just because of the power structure that exists within class. I mean, I could tell that I started teaching undergraduates last year at the end of my career, and it's very different in that setting as well. But I think if you are a co-learner in the same class with learners, that changes the dynamic tremendously. I think several of you said it. There's no power structure there. You're all sharing, an experience and learning from that. So let's open this up for questions and dialogue from the audience. And thank you.
Stu Levin, Senior Research Scientist, Department of Geophysics here. I know there's some structural problems to trying to get experienced people in to work with undergraduates. I do remember some years ago at a Society of Industrial and Applied Mathematicians annual meeting. They had a business thing in the evening. They said, we have all these problems trying to get people to come into the field and teach. So I raised my hand and said, well, my dad, if he had lived to age 55 instead of dying at 54, had said all along he was going to stop being an industrial chemist and go teach. Their answer was, well, those people should go to the high schools, not to the colleges. Now, there's a certain bit there. But now the question I have, especially for the undergraduates, is that 100 years ago, the United States educational system was designed to train students, the young people, for careers in manufacturing. Today, that career is pretty much a thing of the past. It's going to be a career in either service or information technology. Have you seen any changes in your early education that says the public school system is moving in that direction in any of the areas you were from?
I can speak to that a little bit. One of the things that I've noticed progressing, and I also have a younger sister who is a sophomore in high school, is that no longer are people asking, is the answer A, B, C, or D, but now it's more focused on, is it A, B, C, or D, and explain to me why. And I think that that's something that I've noticed, at least in the high school level, and most definitely exercised here at college, is not just knowing what the right answer is, but how to articulate it and how to tell it to people that are either in the same class as you who have learned the material, or maybe people that should not or do not know the material that you have to explain to. And I think I've definitely seen a shift there. I think that it's important to continue to shift that way even more, especially in the undergraduate community at Stanford. A lot of people here know how to study, they know how to read the books, and do what they need to do well on the tests. But how does that translate into the environment outside of the Stanford community, and how will that help them to be global citizens?
Well, so going on the part of your question that you talked about, where you were saying how the careers are changing from manufacturing to more like informatics and service. Well, I actually grew up in the Bay Area, so I live 20 minutes from here, Cupertino, which is where the Apple headquarters is. So it's the heart of technology. And so the high school that I went to was literally 2 minutes away from Apple headquarters. And I could definitely sense that that our high school was aiming to produce students that would work in the area, meaning that sciences were heavily, emphasized. There was no like AP psychology class. There was no AP, I think, government class. It was AP physics, AP CS, that bunch. So I'm a psychology major, and I have not taken CS 106A, but I plan to sometime because it's a growing culture. But yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you in the fact that it's becoming, a century of big data, and we're looking more and more for engineers. But my hope is that, through that process, we also have an increase in the emphasis in humanities, because, we don't want to all become robots and and have robots do things for us. And I actually see the influx of technology helping expand humanities. I mean, you can take online classes, and you can also, there's different ways of expressing, for example, Facebook media. So I definitely see the benefits of both, but I definitely do agree with you on the point that the paradigm is changing. Yeah.
I can expand a little bit on Madeline's point from a international perspective. The Oxford system's very different. It's much less test-based. In fact, you have none until your final year, really. And instead, it's a weekly occurrence where you have a one-on-one tutorial with your professor. And the aim of that is much less about regurgitation of material, but the aim is within the week, you kind of internalize it, synthesize it, and apply critical reasoning and engage in a debate. And it's about essentially developing your thought process and ability to problem solve regardless of the industry. It's just a different approach.
It's an interesting, I'll ask you this question because it's an interesting point. Whether or not that skill set of critical reasoning, which you began as an undergraduate, is that, something that we should be thinking about more in terms of our education systems in the United States?
I think so. And again, I have to caveat everything with it's just my random musings, so take it with a pinch of salt. But I think the world at large is becoming increasingly interdisciplinary. You're seeing tech becoming ever evasive and moving into everything nowadays, from health, government, and so forth. So I think that cross-pollination of ideas, regardless of your particular field of interest, and more just an ability to look at things at large, problem solve, look for the solutions, and being able to articulate that verbally, as opposed to just on paper, is something that's a little bit more relevant to when you enter the real world, and you have to try and persuade managers and others and peers to your idea. But there are certainly benefits to the US system. I think the discipline that you accrue through the test baking is part of the reason why the American economy is #1. So we take long holidays and chill a bit. So.
Jim Plummer talked about the difficulties of getting young faculty, particularly pre-tenure, to do anything outside of their core discipline. And so now there's something that's radically outside, which is looking at across, generations. How does a place like Stanford deal with institutional traditions in both, especially young faculty, but also mid-level faculty who are trying to make a career within their particular discipline? What's the tension?
Yeah.
Seems like it's big.
I think that, there are challenges in terms of our acquisition of skills, our life experience, that is quite variegated depending upon where you are in that cycle. And so if you are an experienced leader in an area, and you're encountering a young faculty person who's just acquiring her or his skills, that can be actually pretty interesting and informative, but also threatening. We actually had this experience last year. Some of our inaugural fellows are in the room, and I remember well when we had a faculty member speak about the spirit of entrepreneurship. And it became very clear within about the first 10 minutes that most of the room of, quote, learners knew more about the spirit of entrepreneurship from their life experience than the person who is teaching, the class. And yet I think that's a great opportunity. It's an opportunity for a different kind of learning to take place, which may go from someone who's had an experience in life that could provide a life experience to a faculty person just as they can to a younger person, and it will go up and down that food chain, as well. Yes.
Manjula Waldron. I'm consulting professor in prevention medicine. Couple of things that were not clear, so I'm going to kind of put it in the panel. One was this co-learning. As a lifelong learner, one of the things I did, I've taught for almost 50 years, as a professor, I just went to another discipline on campus and just audited a course with another professor, build relationship, build with the students. So my question to the panel is, as you talked about, and to Phil, did you orchestrate this co-learning, or was there some barriers that would have existed for you to kind of go where there was somebody older and kind of learn with them? So that wasn't clear to me.
I would say it's also an experiment, just to be very candid with you. And I would say it's happening in several ways and dimensions. It begins with people just spontaneously interacting with each other in classes, right? And I think you heard stories about that. Some folks were in the class on empathy last year that had 12 people in it. 3 were DCI fellows, others were, I think there was a night fellow, and there was a group of other undergraduate and graduate students. Spontaneously, that leads to a different dialogue, right? Then there are things that we have done more formally. So we've created a variety of fora with PhD students and our fellows, and we're doing the same with undergraduates. And then things are rising sort of spontaneously. So like with the Haas Center, or with social innovation. These are things that are beginning to happen because people are reaching out and recognizing there's a value to these kinds of interactions. I think the part that's probably the most important of all is that which takes place spontaneously and in an unanticipated way, just as you have experienced. Is that a safe statement? Yes.
This is a question actually for across the panel. You talk of being learners when you're in a great institution like Stanford or other places you've been at. Some of you can reflect on it in terms of hindsight, and some of you will probably and hopefully answer this question in terms of moving forward. How do you see yourselves as being lifelong learners when you're not engaged in an academic institution?
I can start with that. I think that the situations when I arguably learn the most are when I'm having a conversation with someone and we can talk about something meaningful. So once you get past the surface of where did you grow up, what are you majoring in, and start talking about what matters to you, what is your next project, what are you passionate about. In doing that, I think that you can do that in any environment. I love to talk to people, grab coffee, and I think that by doing that, I won't ever be restricted by the environment that I'm in. Everyone has a story to tell. There's all these cliches, but they're cliches for a reason, because I think that even just listening to these people on the panel, I can see things that I can learn from each and every person that I would want to learn. And it would be great to have environments facilitated by online classes where I can learn more of the nitty-gritty, mathematical equations type thing. But as we get that foundation in an undergraduate setting and move forward, I want to know how I can actually make an impact on people's lives, how my interaction with someone else will make a difference and will help both of us to grow. And I think the best way to do that is by interacting with the people that I want to learn and grow with.
I also, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, Steve has actually been an inspiration to me on this, because as he knows, when I first decided to join the DCI program, one of the things I decided I was going to do right away is to dust off my Spanish and to relearn Spanish. And I was an abject failure. I mean, really bad. And tried a number of different ways to remember the verb conjugations and all that, and I tried Rosetta Stone and all that. And when I met Steve, he really explained that there are so many ways that over a lifetime, not just for the 6 months before I started DCI or for my year in DCI, but over a lifetime, there's so many things I could do to patiently, but methodically and persistently stick with my quest and engage with Spanish-speaking people and with Spanish technology and all sorts of things to just keep the learning going. And that was reassuring to hear that.
So I'm going to add just a layer to your question because it's a question I think about all the time, which is how do you do that and on top of it have a 5-month-old and an almost 4-year-old? And I really, I mean it very seriously. This is a little bit of a personal thing, but a really close friend died a week ago, and she was like me, 37, and no one saw it coming, and all the doctors in the family, but medicine couldn't cure her. And so you just don't know, like there's a part of me that thinks, okay, when they're older, like I'll go back and do stuff, and I don't know that will ever happen. And so to be really specific in answer to your question, Facebook does a lot for me, actually. Like I work hard to sort of like tailor my feed to be productive and full of interesting articles, and I get exposed to a lot that way. I share a lot. I'm super active on social media, like on Twitter, on Tumblr, on all these other sites that I can have those interactions. The MOOCs and stuff don't do anything for me. I have signed up for 1 million and not followed through with any of them. And it might just be that I can't even envision when I would have the time to sit down and take like an hour-long class. It's also just not how I learn. And we stay in the Bay despite the sort of crushing cost of living and sort of rat race of life because of the people that are here and the people that we interact with. So there's a hope for me that, maybe there'll be an elementary school or high school or something, and then I'll get to go back and do more of this. But, I just take the gift that was Stanford, and I just keep coming back here, and they try to kick me out, but I just keep coming back. So.
Great. Well, it is about lifetime learning, and you can continue doing that. Yeah. One last question. Yeah, thank you.
I'm Alan Louie. I'm the Associate Chair of Psychiatry, and thank you, Dr. Pizzo, for assembling this continuum of learners, because my great interest has been in adult development. And I'm interested in people reinventing themselves. I actually tell all my physician residents that they should anticipate having 2 careers, just in case, and prepare themselves as such. So I'm wondering, DCI sounds like almost a laboratory to study this reinventing, which I think is not easy, right? Certainly continuity, just keep on doing what you're doing. Many of us as professors have tons of sabbatical months stacked up because we can't imagine how we can take off one from our other duties. So I'm wondering what lessons you may have had about and actually having 3 careers in instance there, about reinventing yourself and what maybe the others will be facing in the future.
I just take it for granted that what I learned in undergraduate school was how to be a quick study and how to tackle problems with a belief that I can find a way through it. And I've built my own network and communities to make that true over and over again. So I'm reminded daily at Stanford that I really don't know anything about jobs, food, or the environment, but that doesn't seem to matter. I have an opportunity to tackle it and explore it and work with it, discover what I don't know, and connect with people who do know. And I think it's a bit of a mindset, and I was happy in the last panel to hear that building that resiliency and the intellectual curiosity can make a difference. And I firmly believe that we can all reinvent ourselves over and over.
I have a thought about that, though, which is that just because I wish someone had told me this, you should not time your reinvention with another major life change. I mean, I just wish someone had told me that. So I was a litigator for 7 years, and I was a civil rights lawyer, and I loved it, but it was also, really hard, and for many reasons, it was time to move on, and I had my first child, and then I built this journalism project, and then I came to Stanford as a journalism fellow, and then I pivoted from journalism to this combination of journalism and design and law and
You're making me tired just hearing
yeah, but it's not even that I'm tired. I think a lot of it is just so much of your reinvention is also what other people perceive you to be, and so it's just a lot to do all of that at once. And so there's a part of me that wishes I had done it like before maternity leave or something like that. But it makes me think that reinvention is itself a whole humongous thing that is as much a life change as any other life change that you're going through. And yet I think sorry, I'm going to rant for one more second. I think this is one way that we really fail women in this country, which is that so many women are in careers that are very challenging and are also not family friendly. And so a lot of us, that reinvention happens just as we become moms intentionally. And it's just really hard. And the supports don't exist to do that effectively. And so I think I'm not the only person from my law school class who pivoted right as she entered motherhood, and yet, like I said, we're doing reinvention and motherhood at the same time, it's crazy. So it's something worth thinking about when we think about how we support women in the workplace, because it's a conversation we have all the time that is frankly more frustrating than I can actually express right now.
I love the concept of having two careers, the concept of considering two careers simultaneously, and I think that's probably a topic that you could spend a lot of time on. I had an early mentor early in my life who said, he was talking about academia, he says it's great to do that on one hand, and do something else in the other hand. I didn't go into academia at all, but I was a businessman, but I also kept my hand in writing, and I wrote a couple of books along the way and joined boards that were relevant, the National Book Foundation, et cetera. And now at this stage in my career, I'm joyfully returning to my earlier career in journalism and in research. So I'm glad that I kept both sort of alive inside me. And I think that has, Phil, I think that has a lot of potential for a broader discussion about maybe it should be part of the concept of undergraduate education, that yes, it's great that you're a computer science major and engineer, but maybe add something to that.
So what other seeds can you plant?
Yes, and maybe you're dual.
So one thing I'd quickly add is I think there's been a fundamental mindset shift such that nowadays we don't really think about the career as a singular thing, but much more as just a means of income, and I don't think nowadays we no longer pick a trade per se. We don't say, right, I'm an accountant or a lawyer. It's, okay, I'm going to do this, see how it goes, and pivot from there on and just see where the path takes me. And the whole business school is technically a platform to figure out what we want to be when we grow up. And there is, I think Madeline touched on it earlier, almost a paradox of too much choice. So you take some time out to kind of sit back and see what the options are, and then you're almost like the fire hose comes at you and you don't quite know where to start. So I think the great thing nowadays is people are a lot more open to take a bet on you as a person, regardless of the skill set. And you can be, like me, a jack of all trades and seem to get along okay. So.
And I have some good news for that, just real quick. So I work in a lab with Dr. Carstensen, and she actually studies longevity. And one thing that researchers find is that in our generation, our life expectancy is to about 100 years. And the thing is, that kind of changes our whole understanding of how to work, how to go to school, because before, people kind of died at age 50, 60, and no one really cared about grandparents. No one really had grandparents. But with this shifting, huge trend in how we can live our lives, people are retiring at age 65, and they have 30 more years to kind of just do what? They've been pursuing a career for 40 years. So we're actually trying to come up with a way of integrating both work, education, and leisure into a less of a stratified system, because right now the system we have is education, work, and then retirement. But we're trying to come up with this new paradigm that mixes them together. So how can you have some work experience and go to school and be able to go on vacations instead of working till your back breaks until you're age 50?
You know, in your profession, you know that one of the most important indicators of how people are going to do is, do they have a sense of purpose? Do they renew a sense of purpose? And I think that is something you do continuously, and you do it at different stages of life. But there are some where you're called upon to do it in a more galvanizing way as well. And I think one of the things that we've observed from our dialogue with individuals being interested in coming to our program, there's another frame shift that occurs. And it happens usually beginning in around the 50s, which is the call to do something that has real value and social good. And I think we want to harness that value and think about ways of applying it to society in meaningful ways. So with that, I think I want to just take a moment to thank our panelists very much. I want to thank John Mitchell and Petra for helping us to organize this session today, and also to welcome you to the reception. So,
thank you very much, Phil, for organizing this, and thank you all.
Thank you.